What becomes of that Metro leadership? This is an apparent fallout between the DA and the EFF, and we're seeing it playing itself out now in public. Both parties held rallies yesterday, and the drama continued last night when the African Independent Congress Party instructed its sole council in the Metro to vote with the DA. But for some insight on these developments, let's welcome TK Pooe. He's a political analyst and a policy specialist. TK, good morning to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you.
All right, now, what do you make of the latest developments? We know that the DA was guaranteed support by the ACDP, COBE, the Patriotic Alliance. Last night, of course, the AIC coming out and saying, look, our councillor will vote with the DA.
Well, I think you have to take maybe a broader view of this, which is to say, why are people surprised? The DA and EFF, when you look at their ideologies, actually have nothing in common. It was just a matter of what was actually going to set it off. So it just happens so that Nelson Mandela Bay just happens to have a mayor who seems to, I think, attract such issues. Now, as of yesterday, as you've said, it looks like he will be relatively safe. However, the bigger questions to ask is for how long? Because as you know, the nature of coalitions, it actually get three types of coalitions, which is it's either we have an ideology we all agree on, two, we have policy we'll agree on, or three, I'm going to give you something, and in the meantime, if you were to ever rescind that, I'm going to ask for another vote of no confidence. So what's basically happening here is we actually can project this to 2019 to say, how is this going to work in future? So for me, the bigger question is not whether he survives or not, it's to say what's going to happen in 29 if we were to have a national coalition. And from what I'm looking at, it doesn't look very clear, because what does the AIC, what does the Patriotic Alliance, which is actually one of the votes the DA has, and the Democratic Alliance have in common? Yeah. In terms of service delivery. And municipality is actually supposed to be one of the more, it's complex but simple, that you're just basically giving service, ensuring that business has a right to exist. But in terms of ideology, what holds these parties together? That's the bigger question.
Exactly, because I think that is what many people are asking. I mean, going back to the beginning of this marriage, if we may call it that, the whole thing was brought about by the DA stance not to support land expropriation without compensation. It didn't sit well with the EFF, of course. But considering the fact that there was little in common between the two parties, what has changed? Because if you remember correctly, the DA never promised to support EFF policies. Even Julius Malema last night was basically saying, look, there was no marriage in existence between us.
No, he's correct in what he's saying, that they decided to give a vote. But as you said, you can almost say, you know what, you've just said yes, just in a different way to this marriage. And the key thing has been, I think, the coupling away of President Jacob Zuma. The most wonderful thing is to have a common enemy, someone we can all agree that we do not like this person. Now, as the dynamics have changed, and the ANC has seemed to say, listen, I think they're also playing their own politics. Say, listen, if we're to acquiesce to your issues of land, because land is not even, it's become a bigger issue than the ANC and even the EFF. So the ANC does not want to be on the wrong side of history. Now, the key issue has always been, what does the Democratic Alliance stand for on the issue of land? It cuts deep to its ideology. It's a liberal party. Its history has never really been for issues of African people reclaiming the land. I think they look at it more as a market issue. So the question, that has been the biggest change, to say there is no common enemy. So what for do we stand for? Because I can guarantee you, if President Zuma was still in existence, this would be a non-issue. So I think it's just an issue of people now saying, listen, we have nothing really we stand on. And the EFF correctly, because I think some people interpret the EFF as actually doing something wrong. It's the nature of politics. If I don't like you today, why can I not change my mind on it? So it's just the issue of the EFF is just basically saying who can best serve our interests. And as I've said, the ANC has said, listen, we'll go with land expropriation without compensation, with nuances, which basically is another fancy word of just saying there's really no clarity as we stand on it.
Malema, last night, of course, basically saying again that, look, the ANC had voted with us in Parliament on this expropriation of land without compensation, but later now they want to change things. They talk of redistribution, and what we want is expropriation.
And yes, this is where I think you do have to give the EFF credit. The issues are quite clear. It's land, it's a nationalization of the Reserve Bank, which is a bit more complicated. But it's the issue of what do we mean by land? You know, this is where I think it's been the failure of the ANC for the last 2 decades, that they've actually not given us a clear vision of what do we mean by land. Now, I think land goes in two ways. I think if you, the head of the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership, Professor Gumede, actually puts it in two ways. Land is a commercial thing. We really need to sort out the issue that we have a very unequal society when it comes to economics and commerce. But more, I think, centrally, and this is maybe a developing issue, especially if we speak to young people, land for most black people, especially Africans, is a spiritual issue. There is that overarching belief that, listen, and we cannot really say we're over colonialism and apartheid without settling this issue of land. So it's not an an issue that's going to go away. Now, this is where we've actually needed leadership. And it would seem the ANC, for the last 2 decades, including now, it really does not have a clear vision as to say this is the direction we're taking with land. And in the absence of leadership, you'll always get people who come up with their own ideologies and beliefs. Whether they're right or wrong is really not the issue. The key issue we need to look at is where is leadership on this issue? Because I think what people want is just a direction. Yeah. Yes or no? And if you're saying no, based on what?
Well, it looks like there isn't a plan in place. There is not a plan in place as it is now. But let's go back to the numbers. As you said, it looks like Athol Trollip will be safe. For now, Malema saying that himself as well last night, that it might not go in our favor today, but surely we'll keep doing it.
This is where I think if you look at the history of the Democratic Alliance, going back to when they took over the city of Cape Town, they normally start with a small advantage, and over the years they actually tend to grow it. In fact, there's actually an interesting analysis. Most parties that have gone into coalition with the DA, over the course of 5 to 10 years, actually dissipate. They actually go down. If you look at, I think that one of the earliest coalitions we had post-1994 was the DA and the IFP. And the IFP suffered dramatic losses. Hence, I think they've always been a bit apprehensive to go back into bed with the DA. So the issue then gets to be, if you are this party, because I think the Patriotic Alliance has been promised a deputy mayor position, which then raises the question, especially to the DA, you've always come on the issue of we're a principal party. If you look at, we're not casting aspersions, but if you look at the Patriotic Alliance, what does it actually stand for? We know what its founders are, and we've heard the controversies around their founders, which then asks the question to the DA, are you now actually understanding what it means to be in power? That you and I might have principles, but sometimes politics is an amoral activity. And that raises the bigger, that for me is a bigger question.
But Kenshi, do you think it was opportunistic of the DA to sort of seize the moment at the time when the EFF wanted to punish the ANC?
It was. I mean, it was strategic on their behalf, because really, how is the DA honestly going to grow without people seeing it? The big case for the DA has always been the issue of how do we run the city of Cape Town, and later on, how do we run the Western Cape? Now, but the argument I've always made is if you actually look at how Democratic Alliance does, they're not really great when it comes to policy. What they are great at is management. Now, the question needs to be, as a country, do we need management, or do we actually need strategic leadership in the form of policy? So it just so happens that for the last basically close to 10 years or so, President Jacob Zuma has actually been a great savior for opposition parties, because from our side, we've not really had to ask, what does the opposition stand for? And when they are in government, how do they actually govern differently? So the DA really has been quite strategic to be able to coalesce people, including the EFF, to say, listen, the key issue has been President Jacob Zuma. But what they've actually been failing to ask, and I think maybe this is a question we need to ask going into the 2019 elections, how do opposition parties actually, maybe how do I put this, actually grow our issues of economic development? How do they actually govern? Because it's very easy to actually look at the ANC. Their faults are very out in the open. I don't really think we have to air them. But the issue tends to be, what is the opposition going to stand for? And I think that's the bigger question. And the DA has been able to get away with really not answering questions about its governance models, its issues of policy, because they've actually had this great shield called President Jacob Zuma to run around.
But do you think we'll see more coalitions after the 2019 elections?
My personal view is this. I'm not really a fan of coalitions, because this is basically the gist of a coalition. There is a party which has messed up, but people do not trust. There is a party which people have voted for, but they don't quite trust it enough to give it a 50+1. So in the absence of having clear direction and people making up their minds, we basically have an old party and a new party basically having to swap votes. Now, people have this romantic view of coalition parties. They think about the coalition from 1994 to 1996 within the government of national unity. But in truth, it actually inhibits policy. Because at the moment, if you put the DA and the ANC in a coalition, or the EFF, what does that mean for economic development? Because we all know they've got divergent points of view. I hope we don't have coalitions, because I think we need an outright majority.
Okay. Now, we know the EFF tried twisting the ANC's arm by imposing Mcebisi Jonas as their preferred mayoral candidate. Do you think this is a genuine call, or is it sort of bullying tactics by the EFF? I mean, he was even saying that again last night, Julius Malema, that we wanted Mcebisi Jonas or something close to Mcebisi Jonas.
That's actually more interesting, because it's a party which still has 60%, let us not actually forget. And then there's a party, if I'm not mistaken, the EFF is still below the 20% threshold. So it was an issue of how does a younger sibling all of a sudden tell the household how to work. So that for me was like, who are you to tell us who we're going to bring? So I think maybe it was the EFF overreaching, to be very honest.
All right. Okay, TK, we have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for coming through. We'll wait and see what happens at the Nelson Mandela Bay today.
Thank you.
All right, that was TK Pooe. He's a political analyst and a policy specialist. TK was giving his perspective on what is about to go down at the Nelson Mandela Metro today as the EFF brings a motion of no confidence in Mayor Arthur Trollip. We're taking a quick break here on Morning Live. There's still so much more to come. Don't go away.